What's going on, everybody? Today is an exciting day for a lot of us here. It's a big day for me. I've been working really hard for a long time. I've been making PvP videos for 4 years now for World of Warcraft. And today, after some of my recent videos, it's a celebration. We got Blizzard to release their PvP gearing update system, a first look at their gearing system for PvP in Shadowlands. And I'm going to be going over that as a lot of people in my stream. I just got done streaming I Am Fried, but a lot of you guys asked me to make a video on my thoughts, what I think, and then I'm also going to be talking about, or dispelling some of the myths that I'm seeing online, clearing up some things for a lot of people, because I think some people who don't have access to Shadowlands or haven't really looked into it are just basing a lot of these opinions off Battle for Azeroth, and Shadowlands is very different in terms of gear acquisition and just how readily available loot is when compared to BFA. It's much different. So I'm going to be breaking that stuff down. I'll show you some gameplay and we'll hop into it. This is a freestyle video, no script. I'm just going to go over it with you guys really quickly because I want to work on another very big video about Battlegrounds. So we'll be, hopping into that after this. So right away, Blizzard decided to use Versatility as a pseudo PvP stat. Okay, Versatility, for those of you who are not aware, is essentially resilience and PvP power fused into a single stat. It increases your damage done and your healing done, and it reduces the damage that you take. If you saw my last video that I just posted, I talked about that. Link in the info box if you want to watch that video. So they're using Versatility as the pseudo PvP stat, and I think I have the spreadsheet actually here. Yeah, here it is. So in this video, if you watch that video of mine, I talked about all the desired stats for almost all classes in PvP, and then I also talked about what was currently on the vendor. This was the video that generated a lot of attention and I think got Blizzard's attention. And I also submitted some written feedback to them as well, talking about, well, if you do not want to add a PvP stat to gear to fix the vendor system, you could just simply have all versatility based combinations. And this is an idea that I shot around for a while because the development team was pretty against doing a PvP stat because they wanted gear to be able to be you could transition your gear set from PvP and PvE. You could take your PvE gear into PvP if you wanted to, and that obviously affects participation, gets more people into PvP, and then vice versa. If you have PvP gear, it's not useless in PvE. They try to move away from that, and that's why they didn't want to do a PvP stat. So what they're going to be doing now is essentially the idea that I had suggested initially, where you just have versatility combinations for every item. So now what you can expect is they're going to have 2 combinations or 2 items per item slot. So you have 2 helmets, 2 shoulders, 2 gloves, 2 bracers on the vendor. You get the point. And those will always have a versatility-based combination. So versatility haste, versatility mastery, and versatility crit. Those are the desired stats for almost all classes. I mean, it's all classes in PvP. They want versatility-based combinations. So you won't have 3 combinations available for every item, but you'll have 2. And they state here that the vendor will not offer perfect coverage for every stat combination, but neither does any other single source of gear in WoW. And this is true. In Shadowlands, gearing has changed a lot. So crafting is going to be a major way in which you acquire some of your gear. Your legendaries that you make will also be able to you'll also be able to tailor the stats on that item. So if you want haste verse, you can make a haste verse legendary. You can craft haste verse gear with leatherworking, tailoring, etc. So a lot of your gear will come through other sources of gearing. And then they also nerfed that same day that they released this blue post, the day that, depending on when you're watching this video, they also nerfed Mythic Plus and its gearing system. Mythic Plus, they slowed down the rate of drops from Mythic Plus. I believe it's 1 item per dungeon. And the item level from the max rank, 15 plus a 15 key, which is a advanced dungeon if you don't know what Mythic Plus is. The item that you get from that dungeon used to be above heroic raid loot, which was very favorable for trying to hyper gear your character extremely fast. If you wanted to gear for PvP, the first thing you go do is Mythic Plus. Well, now the gear that comes from Mythic Plus will be harder to acquire because it's just lower drop rate, and the item level on those items is just lower. I mean, it's below now heroic raid loot, where in the past it was above heroic raid loot. And Mythic Plus did really cause a lot of gearing problems, right? Because everyone that wanted to gear for PvP, they would just spam Mythic Plus, because Mythic Plus would give you all of the best stat combinations at an easy acquisition rate, and you were also getting Titan forging from them and sockets, and then before the corruption vendor, you were getting corruption. So it was just crazy. Mythic Plus was such an amazing way to gear, and now that's not the case. So And even in the raid itself, there's not that many favorable stat combinations with versatility on them, and we'll talk about that. There's just not that many verse items from raid. So most of your gear is going to come from PvP, and maybe one item will come from the raid, maybe 1 to 2 on average from what I checked. So in general, you're going to be getting most of the options you want. You may go min-max to grab one, a pair of bracers or a helmet or a ring, for example, but you won't even need a ring for the most part. So just maybe an item or two will come from PvE, and most of it will come from PvP. But we'll talk about some of the concerns in a bit here. Also, they are adding a 2-piece set bonus by using 2 PvP trinkets. So when you equip 2 PvP trinkets, the medallion, the battle master, all the old school PvP trinkets that you had used in the past, if you have 2 of them equipped, you will receive an increase on the damage and healing benefit of versatility, not the defensive benefit. So essentially you're getting a PvP power buff while in Arenas, Battlegrounds, or War mode. So the reason why they're doing this is there are a lot of problems with PvE trinkets in PvP. It's been that way for a long time, not even in BFA. Trinkets have been a huge thing in WoW PvP for a long time, where they were just so strong and they caused a lot of issues. So essentially they're trying to remove that, right? We had so many trinkets in BFA. We had the dress trinket, we had the obsidian claw trinket, we had the void stone, we had the lingering spore pods, we had the lingering psychic shell, we had, there's just so many, I can't even remember. There was the mummy trinket from King's Rest. It's been like that for a while. And they had to nerf all of these trinkets so many times because they were just so absurdly broken in PvP that now they're trying to say, hey, if you want to use one of those trinkets, you're going to lose out on a big damage buff. Now, the issue is what percentage buff are we going to see? That needs to be a high enough number that you don't use those trinkets. And I'm assuming Blizzard's just going to nerf those trinkets in PvP anyway, right? They're probably going to nerf them anyway. So I'm assuming that they're doing this to say, hey, we don't want you to use PvE trinkets, just use the PvP ones, and I think that's great for the gameplay. So overall, this is an amazing system, but I do want to talk about a few things here. So one of the important things that I want to mention, and here I am in the game, is that a lot of players were saying, well, you're still going to go do Mythic raiding because the item level on the PvP gear is so much lower than Mythic raiding gear. Well, first of all, let's look at the Mythic raiding gear. So Mythic raiding gear is 226, right? But I'm on a Disc Priest here. And again, for every class, it's going to be different. But I went through almost all of the classes. There are very few ideal stat combinations from the raid for almost all classes. So if you look here, I'm looking for haste versatility. And as I'm going through all this Mythic raid loot, I can't, there's probably one somewhere. There's one here. There's a mythic pair of pants for Clothies that they'll probably want to go grab. That might be ideal if you can't find it on the vendor. There's a cape, but the vendor will already have a haste first cape, so you won't need that. And that's it. Now, the last boss will always drop weapons at a 233 item level. And the last 2 bosses in raid drop higher item level than the rest of the raid and possibly the highest item level in the game. That's what we saw in BFA. But the item level difference is literally 6 item level, I believe. It's a 6 item level, 7 item level increase. So it's very minor. That's not going to be game changing unless there's any extra effects on those items like corruption, right? But assuming that gear is just going to be gear, and that's what they stated going into Shadowlands, that gear is just going to be gear and there's not going to be any extra effects like that, we don't have to worry about that in this expansion. But I also want to mention the item level of the Conquest gear. So the vendor has not been updated yet, but you can see that unranked gear is item level 190. So this is the PvP Conquest gear. It's 190, and the Mythic item level gear is at an item level of 226 to 233, I believe. So a lot of people are saying, oh, it's so much lower in item level, it's not any good. This is the unranked gear. And if you go back and look, now at BFA, you can see that unranked gear was below 1400 rating, which is extremely low for arena rating. I'm sure people are out there trying to learn the game, but that's a very low rating, right? Almost anybody can get over 1400. That gave you end of match 430, weekly cash 445. So this is not going to be an accurate, I would say it's going to be generally pretty accurate, but it's not going to be exact, I should say, of what you would expect the item level jump from the unranked gear to the max rank gear that you would get from PvP, the max rank conquest gear. Well, the max rank conquest gear jumps about 35 to 30 item levels. So if the gear that you're looking at is at an item level of 190, well, it's going to go anywhere from 220 to 225. And if it's at 220 to 225, that is not that much of a difference between 226 and potentially 233 for a weapon. Okay? But even if there's an eye level jump from Mythic rating gear, it's still not going to have the stats that you want on them. And picking an item that's 5 item levels higher with the wrong stats is not, that's not good. You're not going to go for 5 item levels with the wrong stats. It just doesn't make any sense. Stats are extremely important in World of Warcraft. So I wanted to dispel the myth about it being lower item level. And I also want to talk about really quickly, a lot of players were saying, well, it's time gated to acquire the gear. You have to farm the conquest. We don't know how hard it's going to be to farm this gear. That is something that we need to know about. That system hasn't been released yet, and that's going to be a big point of discussion when it is released, is how hard is it to acquire this gear. But the fact that it's time gated, well, it's always been time gated, right? Like, you've literally always had to time gate. That's how it's always been. You would farm for about a week or two and you'd get an item, right? But if most of your stat combinations don't come from rating, essentially you'll be doing BGs if they fix the BG system, which they have not touched on. And don't worry, I'm going to make a big video about that because I think it's extremely important. Or you'll be doing some dungeons in the beginning to complete your kit until you finish your conquest gear, right? Until you finish this gear, you'll have to have some filler pieces that you'll get from other forms of content, but it should come from BGs. That's how it should be. Just like you'll do dungeons to get ready for raid, you should be able to do BGs to get ready for arena. And that is, for me, how the game should go. Right? That is how ideally the system should be. And don't worry, I'm going to work on that. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for all of the support recently. It's been absolutely incredible. Everyone on my stream has been it's been outrageous. I can't thank you guys enough for tuning in on all my videos, support me the way that you have. In the comments, everyone's been so nice, and I'm going to continue working on a lot of other stuff about PvP, like the BG system is coming up next, because that for me is equally as important as arenas. A lot of people say, who cares about Battlegrounds, who cares about BGs? Well, you should care. That's how the game has been for a long time. You would always do BGs. BGs were a big part of the game, and now they're just a forgotten thing, and that's the issue, is who cares about BGs? Well, we should. And I'm going to talk about that because I think it's a major source of content that's just fun. They're just fun. And there should be some incentive behind that. And there's some other things about class balancing and things like that that I'll talk about along the way. But I really want to thank you guys again for tuning in. Thank you guys for all the new subscribers. If you want to check out my live stream, you can find it here somewhere on the screen. And I appreciate you coming by. I stream Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 12 p.m. PST. And with that being said, we did it, guys. We did it. You guys did it. I didn't do anything. You guys did it. I really appreciate all the support. And I'll see you all in the next one.